controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are a sub-science here to make things make sense.
We needed that.
Solar
Panels.
Damn it.
We just got solar panels, and they officially are finally hooked up, and our house is off the grid.
Yeah.
How does it feel?
It feels, that's why I wanted to do this episode, because I'm like, it feels too good to be true. Like, or it's just like,
It's wild.
the light that's coming on my face right now is from the sun's power. Okay.
I mean, it's
Okay.
actually, it is. It's a little confusing and misleading because obviously in a big city, you tie into a grid and you give power to that grid. Any power we're using while the solar is, like while the sun's hitting the solar, and if we have lights on or anything, it will automatically use that. But any extra goes to the city, and then we still are pulling from the grid.
But we
use
and to the
our
battery.
What?
And to the battery at the side of our house.
That's not a battery.
What?
No, we don't. There's no battery.
Wait, so at night what happens?
We're running off the city's power.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I thought that was a battery. What's that big giant thing beside us?
That's just how it calibrates the information.
God. Okay, wow. So you're learning in real
Luckily-
time what is going on. Wait, so at night but okay, whoa. You're gonna like watch us really figure this out on the spot. 97% of our energy can now come from our solar panels. If we were to conserve a little bit more energy, we will 100% be off the grid. But is that not true because at night we're not using it? The energy has to be stored in a battery if at night we're using lights.
No, we're using the grid power. That's why, for example, solar power in and of itself isn't sufficient until battery power becomes, or battery capacity becomes better. It's not the best way to do it. So, and I might be slightly wrong, but I'm pretty sure the power that goes into the city gets used elsewhere.
Gotcha. So
because
it's net
instantaneous. It's
zero.
way cheaper for them to give the power through solar while it's there than to pay for infrastructure for batteries. Luckily, where we live is like extremely green energy in the first place. Like I think maybe 70% of Ontario's energy grid comes from renewables. Is that true?
No, Ontario is one of the greenest places.
Yeah,
There's
so
no coal being
we
burnt.
are still using that grid. And so that is perhaps a flaw in terms of even if people get solar power, you still need to be set up to the grid. Otherwise, when there wasn't sun, you wouldn't have power, or where there wasn't wind. You need like those backup things.
So
right?
how come they can say that we're off the grid? Because what happens is during the day we're giving so much more back to the grid that it net zero.
Yeah, I mean, we are not off the grid because we live in a city and our house is still connected to the grid.
And we don't have a
But-
battery to store the
And we don't have a
energy for the
battery.
night.
And people would be like off the grid when they're outside of a city and they actually either have battery capacity or just able to create their own needs and literally disconnect. But the city had to come to our house and install a new meter because and most cities are like this, they install these meters that only read how much power is coming in. So they had to update meters. So anyone who has solar now, at least in Toronto, but I assume everywhere else in the world, has to get a new meter that can also calculate the power that's leaving the house.
And so that's
what they subsidize you with.
Yeah, and so they say because during the day you're giving so much more back to the grid that in the end you are net zero, because at night when they're giving us the lights to use at night, they're like, well, during the day you produced
you gave
a
us,
bunch
it's
of
like
power.
the average house gives something like 20
Gotcha.
kilowatt hours. I don't know the
Wow, I
exact number.
literally walked by my friends the other day and like smacked that thing. I was like, this big old battery right here. It's like, nope, that's just the infrastructure.
But I think that is where a lot of renewable technology is moving, is battery capacity is so key. If we can make amazing batteries that are efficient and cheap, then it's worth it to store the energy.
Yeah. Okay, so first we're going to explain what electricity is, and then we're going to explain how solar panels work, and then we're going to explain whether or not they're going to save us. And obviously the answer is no, because we were just like, we need lots of other things at night, we'd be screwed. So electricity is essentially the flow of electrons. If you can force electrons in, we're going to stick with DC current, direct current for now, in one direction, the flow of the electrons through something like a copper wire can turn a light bulb on. For example, a light bulb, it would be like an older light bulb because it changes to a new substance where the electrons actually start to slow down and collide and create light. But amazingly, we've made all these appliances where the flow of electrons is utilized to do whatever it is.
Blows my
blows
mind. Like, I don't think I've ever
my
fully
frickin'
understood electricity, but then realizing, like, it literally, everything
It's
we're
so
doing right now, we have a
frickin'
light, we have a
crazy.
camera, we have mics, we have this box, we have laptops, tablets, like, the basis of all of them is the movement of electrons
And
that exist on atoms.
Yeah. And it's also just like, it also, the climate crisis is an electricity crisis. Like, the link between the knowledge of electricity is so important in the climate crisis. I feel like I was just like talking about the climate crisis forever, not fully understanding what electricity is. And then you start to learn, you're like, oh my God, it's just like we're burning fossil fuels to create steam, to move turbines that move batteries, to push electrons around so that we can all power our computer and phone. It's just like, it's crazy. You're like, what the hell systems are we living in? Like, they're amazing.
And also,
But it's like,
historically, how sort of new it is. Like,
Yeah.
we live in, like, almost all of human existence didn't have electricity. There may have been at points rudimentary ideas and forms of it, but, like, we tend to think of human existence in our own little bubble, but you go back not that far, and it's like everything we interact with in our lives now is, at the base of it, electrical.
Also,
Everything.
imagine.
I wake up, I brush my teeth with an electric toothbrush. I like have a shaver, I have a whatever. Like, there's a TV, there's a toaster, there's a fridge,
The dildo.
everything we
The
do,
vibrator.
is every light bulb, everything in our house, my phone, my whatever. It's just like, to think of a world without electricity is pretty wild.
Also, people before electricity, if you were like, so there's these things called electrons, like immediately they'd be like, what? You know what I mean? You'd be like, oh yeah, things are made of atoms. And in the middle of the atoms, there's protons and neutrons, and around them are electrons. We have to get into the quantum realm to really understand it. But those electrons in the outer shell, if you can move them in one direction, you can watch a TV show. They'd be like, what the hell are you even talking about? And like, why would you even want to watch a TV? Like, it's just like, we are just so...
And I'm gonna be like, I also don't understand it fully.
Oh my
You know what
God.
I mean? To think that we live in this time, and I'm like, I kind of get like electricity and power, but then when you convert it into other elements
Like a TV?
sound
Or sound, like
I'm
a speaker, a
what is
headphone.
happening through this mic into this box into a card that we put on our computer that we then edit and then we put on the internet, and it's sound in your ears
Also,
across the world.
when you're looking this up,
Through
people
wires.
do not know how to explain it.
No,
Like,
I know.
There's a really
Every video-
interesting moment where it's like,
It's
we
too
can
complicated.
explain that electrons move in one direction and that creates electricity. But whenever there's like that moment where you have to try and understand how that movement of electrons, for example, creates a Netflix show that your eyes watch with, you're right, perfect sound that was filmed the day that it was filmed. People just like glance over it and they're like, well, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to Engineer. Like, it's like, because it's like, there's obviously such a complexity there that is probably an electrical engineering degree is like what is required. And that to me is fascinating. Like, people who get that, like, call us, message
Call
us, come
us.
on the show. Like, I'm like, I want to know how. Like, they'll be like, through a lot of confusing science, the electrons essentially are programmed to the back of your TV. The back of your TV like knows based
through like
on
zeros and ones in terms of like the information is traveling so fast that it can explain to a tiny little square of which there are thousands of them which color
it should be, like which color it should be.
Oh my God.
Like, it's crazy. It's actually the most incredible thing in the world. So it's just like, okay, we need to
We're
all
so stupid. No, I don't mean stupid. I just mean like we're having this revelation, just being like, electricity is amazing, is insane, but also hopefully everyone else can relate.
So if anyone asks you what is electricity, you say amazing. So, okay, a solar panel. Here we go. Okay. It's also such a visual thing that we're going to do our best to explain it. But a solar panel, in essence, is made most of the time of silicone. Now, silicone is like, usually it's made from sand. It's like melted down. It's a semiconductor. And you add hydrogen to the silicone to sort of like get it to the right, like, kind of substance. But like, in theory, when you're looking at them, you can be like, in your head, like, okay, there's a bunch of silicone. So what is needed is a gradient. Like we're needing electrons to flow in one direction in order for electricity to occur. Like we've just said that. So what they do,
it's a missed opportunity that One Direction didn't make a song about electricity.
You're right. And they would have had a direct current line.
Yeah.
Like, we're not an alternating current type boy. We're directly to you. Direct current. Okay, whatever.
Anyway. Okay, stop pulling the mics. You're going to flip the table.
Yeah. Oh, now I'm pissed. I'll flip the table. So in the solar panel, there are two sides, essentially. And on one side, there'll be something part of the silicone that's quote unquote doped with something like phosphorus. And then on the other side, there'll be a part of the solar panel that's doped with something called boron.
Why is it called dope?
Because they call it doping because it's like you actually are just like adding this thing to the silicone. Almost like when you're doping, you're taking a drug. Like they dope it. There's an N and a P side. You can dope with other things, but like phosphorus and boron are common ones.
I had no idea that. I guess that word probably means something specific.
Yeah, it's so funny because a lot of time when they like show animations, they show like a needle like doping, like as if they're like injecting phosphorus. But it's like, okay, so then what happens is photons, which is the energy coming from the sun, hits these solar panels, and because of the phosphorus and the silicone and the boron and the silicone, electrons get pushed out of the boron and the phosphorus. But because of the gradient between those two semiconductors, all the electrons actually end up wanting to go to one side towards the phosphorus side. Okay. And then on the other side are these things called holes. Now, holes are very confusing. Holes essentially are places.
Not to confuse with the movie Holes.
Yeah, or like
great
a hole,
film.
like your butthole. Not to be confused with your butthole. Holes are places where electrons can go. But essentially, the photons force electrons in one aspect of the solar panel and holes in the other.
Okay.
And then what electrons naturally want to do is fill in the holes. Now they want to go to the holes. And what solar panels are able to do is when those electrons are moving down to the hole, which is like the law, according to the laws of nature, what they want to do based on the physics, they capture them. Like, and when they're moving, they take that energy and that movement and en masse, because this is happening so, like there's so many cells in a solar panel, en masse, you're getting a bunch of electrons moving in one direction that they harness as electricity.
I just don't understand who figured this out.
Who the hell figured this out? And why are we not like, this is the like anyone who thinks solar panels like
why
aren't
don't
cool
I know their
is
name?
Like, yeah,
maybe a lot of people do. And
I think maybe like many people who like do. Do you think people like do?
Like, was their name Solar?
Was it Lord?
That's really cool. I don't know that I ever fully understood that, and even now I'm like, I still don't know if I do, but it's very cool that we can capture sunlight, which makes sense. You know, you feel it on your skin. You're like, this is energy.
Yeah, like this is obviously busting around some like I can see it busting around electrons on the solar panel.
It's like obviously powerful.
Yeah.
So use it.
So the coolest. So that's sort of how electricity and solar panels like work. One of the most important things to know about solar panels is that their efficiency is increasing. So like when we think about fossil fuels, we have reached the limit of the efficiency of burning coal. We have reached the limit for the efficiency of fossil fuels. Like they're not a type of thing that we can get more out of them, like more energy, for example. We know how they work. We've been using them for years. They're ruining the environment. They're ruining our future like lives on this planet. We know that. When it comes to solar panels, wind energy, a lot of these green energies, what's so exciting is that their efficiency is increasing. They're not these things that have plateaued in any way. Like you said, with battery technology, we can figure out how to like store more energy. Like I was just reading about how they found this mineral perovskite, which is in Russia. And when they mix that with the silicone, all of a sudden they're getting these crazy efficiency numbers that they've never had before. So it's like solar panels are the ones on our roof. In like 5 years, there's going to be even better versions of harnessing the energy. Whereas if we're thinking about fossil fuels, you're done, bud. You're cut. There's nowhere to go. There's no physical law of nature. There's no physics left to harness any more of this energy, which is another reason why we need to be switching over and learning more about these new renewable energies, because there's so much more potential, no pun intended, like potential energy.
Yeah. I mean, how do you suppose is the best way to go about this, because obviously putting solar panels on our home was expensive, and I only say that because we're privileged and lucky enough to be able to afford that.
Yeah, we should talk about that.
And decided, we want to do this. It'll make us feel good, and we'll be happy and proud of it. But I would not expect most people to want to necessarily upfront that. Over the long run, we'll probably get money back over the 25 years that they can last on a roof, assuming everything goes well. And you know what I mean? They don't get destroyed.
Let's explain that, the financial aspect. So it is definitely not cheap, and the value that they have on our home right now, a justification, we paid for it flat out to put them on our home, was that if we ever tried to sell our home, it would increase our home's value by more than what they cost. So because technically someone moving into this home now
has their energy paid
wouldn't have to pay for energy.
Yeah, because we're you can also have them installed and pay a monthly fee.
And it's kind of funny because in Toronto, if you think about the housing market, that is a very enticing thing. You go, here's this house, and there's no electricity bill because your solar panel. You can see how the crazy way the housing market works, that could make your house go up so much more in value than what it costs. But the other way that you do it is kind of like a cell phone plan in Canada, where
it's like a lease to own, basically.
Yeah, you pay it off every month for 25 years
with interest,
but that ends up being more than your electricity bill. So that was when I was kind of if you do it that way, you are fronting money for the environment. You are taking a cost for the environment. And it's frustrating because it's it would be so sweet if it was cheaper.
There are, and obviously it's different all around the world, there are incentives to do this. We currently live in a place where the conservative government got rid of any incentive for green energy, including buying a Tesla. The government here used to give you $10,000 or $15,000 off. I think that's gone. So we did it at a time
retrofitting buildings to be green.
Yeah, but we did this at a time where we didn't really get a crazy benefit from it. But there might be better times for other people when different governments in power who will subsidize or give you money back if you install solar panels or have a electric vehicle, for example.
So this leads to political will. If you live in Canada, do not vote for the conservative government. They are anti-science.
They literally changed it. It's crazy.
Yeah, they got rid of the incentives for people to have solar panels because they want to continue to extract oil because they're funded by fossil fuel companies. It's very simple.
And they make it seem this is free money we're giving away, but it's the fossil fuel industry is already subsidized. The agriculture industry, there's already so much money in places, even when you're comparing better for the environment foods versus meat. So meat alternatives or milk alternatives, they're more expensive because they're not subsidized in the same way.
Yeah.
And it's not really an even playing field. And I understand it's complex. It's happened over the course of decades. There might be reasons to support economies to keep those economies strong that they subsidize it. But it is sad when you see a government come in and try and add those subsidies, and then another one come in and just ditch them when that's so clearly the future too.
Exactly. It's they not only are they not a conservative government or a Republican government if you're American, and you can go, it's sadly just a weird division that exists across a lot of democracies. These more right-wing people who have more interest in big companies, for example, or the fossil fuel industry. The fact that they came in and rolled back the work that the people before did to create green energy is the most sadistic part. It's one thing to just not do it, but it's another to roll it back. The fact that we are now paying more for solar panels on our house, and the solar panel companies are actually just under the assumption that a government that isn't conservative becomes elected, you'll start to see more financial benefits for your solar panels. You might start to even make money off the grid if you produce more energy than you use. But they're but we can't do that now.
If you make more energy than you consume. Right now, because of our conservative government, that's not the case. So we will only ever break even for now until that law gets changed. Or regulation gets changed.
It's crazy.
But also, so one of the studies that I was looking into, or the study that I'll talk about, it's pretty brief, was just about the economy and about jobs. And there was this mass review, research paper that just looked into the effect that green energy will have on jobs, like mostly solar and wind. Because, you know, a lot of people say like there's going to be so many jobs lost in the fossil fuel industry. Like what is the impact of this?
Which is fair.
Which is fair. And that is a real conversation that needs to happen. But basically they were looking at if we try to stay well under this like 2 degrees Celsius temperature increase by investing in renewables, what will be the impact? And their main finding was that if we reach this, we would increase energy section jobs by net 8 million by 2050. So by 2050, there would be 8 million more jobs if we committed to the Paris Agreement global targets.
That is why.
And that was primarily due to solar and wind technology.
That's so interesting. And it makes sense. We have to build these things.
I'm absolutely terrified there's a storm outside.
There's a true...
Our solar panels definitely aren't working right now.
I hope they don't blow off. No, I'm kidding. They're really secured on. We're good. We love it.
But I am like, I can hear the wind. It's getting scary.
Yeah, it's ominous. But that is why the Green New Deal makes economic sense. I'm really like frustrated about this tension between like economics and like against the Green New Deal.
Well,
when you start to study what it is about, it is obviously about taking care of people who work in coal and taking care of people who work in the tar sands in Canada. And the way that you do that is you actually get them to start to work on these solar farms, to work on this wind energy, to help with hydro, which is like a big, huge part of the Ontario, for example, way that we get energy. And there's so many people, you can read all about them in Alberta, who are working in the tar sands, who are like, we would love that. I don't want to be working with the thing that I know is ruining my kid's future. Like, it's not like it's just like these, it's not super, like, it's not as divided, I feel like,
from
the worker perspective as it's being told to us from politicians and like big corporations.
I think it also just is the difference of long-term planning. It's similar to the pandemic, where it's like, obviously it costs money to put research and funding into vaccines, virus like spread, like prevention, like things that when you realize when it's too late and now there's a pandemic in it, had we done, and even Canada, like they got rid of the vaccine facilities, so we couldn't even make our own vaccines.
Yeah, and now they're like, okay, I guess we'll make a vaccine facility. We're like, yeah.
But of course, that like the reason people get rid of it because they go, it costs money.
Yeah.
Yes, this may cost money up front. Of course,
yes, it will.
Developing new technologies, installing new technologies, training people to be in these sectors and in these industries costs money. But just like every day, it's like a new study comes out that's like, it'll save billions of dollars.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like healthcare in the first place, where you look at the States and you're like, it actually costs people more money to not have a universal healthcare system. It costs their country more money. This is just like, yeah, it's interesting that it comes from the angle from some people of like the economic side of things, when it's like more and more, it's just overwhelming evidence that this is smart for your country.
And better economically, better to create jobs. But yes, maybe right now will cost more money. It's like about foresight. And I'm just thinking that with like the grid, I feel like when we're recording this in Louisiana is still down. Like they don't have power. The infrastructure and cost that is going to take to fix all of that is insane. New York, like the cost of all of that flooding is insane. So there is all of these municipalities where your tax-paying money is now going to just get you to back to where you were, as opposed to making things better.
It's literally the definition of a Bandaid solution.
Exactly.
It's like, why don't you prevent the injury in the first place?
Yeah, and it is a little abstract to be like preventing the injury is solar panels, it is wind energy, it is retrofitting houses to be more efficient, it is weaning ourselves off of fossil fuel, it is nuclear energy, it's all these things. But like, we're screaming. The scientists are screaming. Like, people are screaming. There's politicians who have brilliant Green New Deal plans that make sense. And it's just so frustrating because it just feels like there's so much political garbage that gets in the way of a very clear issue. And no longer am I going to allow an economics person to tell me otherwise based on what I've read. And I'm just like, explain to me how you're going to pay for all the damage from climate change. Like, just explain to me that, because they're like, well, maybe.
Well, you have to understand there's vested interest that a lot of people aren't willing to disclose. Of course, people who run oil companies and oil rigs are like, yeah, I don't fucking care about the future. They're like, but I can make money right now.
I know,
like it's not always the same people. The people who are fighting and have power are often people with a ton of money and that they're able to influence others. I do think you're right when you say like most average people want to not harm the environment. If they could snap their fingers and we'd be fully on renewable energy on a planet where we're not destroying the planet, would do it. But there are a lot of people with a lot of money and power invested to not have that happen.
Because I think about Canada a lot as like a horribly hypocritical country because of the tar sands. Like I always try and think about that. Like, okay, if all of a sudden we just shut off the tar sands, that's a big chunk of our
like
economy that is now gone. But I'm like, okay, but we need to put a date in the future where we say they're done then.
Right.
And now we have to start creating the tent poles that make us get there in order to save money in the future from climate change that's going to affect Canada. Like Germany's starting to do it with coal. They have some like really amazing like plans to get off of coal. I'm like, we'll see it. But like they're putting in the work to get it done. And that's a part of their political conversation. And people are now coming around to it. I'm like, in Canada, we need to start talking about those dates. And when you see in our politicians right now, everyone's too afraid to say that because they're worried about getting votes in Alberta. They're worried about losing votes in Alberta.
But
I'm
there's
like,
a lot of people whose jobs would be affected.
Yeah,
but that's why it's important to make it clear. Well, there's
Yeah.
two things. One, it is like, yes, if we could snap our fingers, we would do it. But I think a lot of people acknowledge, yes, let's make sure we're looking out for the people who will be negatively affected.
Exactly.
There are
That's
lots
what
of
I mean
people
by,
whose
like,
lives
future
will
day
be
tent
changed.
poles.
Yes.
And how do you entice those people to keep their vote by securing
scare
jobs for
them.
them? And
Yeah.
there's ways you can do that. There's people who have written and studied this and talked about plans. And I just like wonder if there's like a politician out there of the AOC of Canada, which we desperately need, who can like just like articulate this well.
Yeah, but even still with someone like AOC, think of that's one person in all of America. I know there's more than just her, but it's like she can't get that much done on the country scale.
Yeah, I know.
But obviously she's a really important voice and someone that people look to.
Or Bernie.
And yeah, there are people who like really use them as figures to represent a movement. I mean, I've never like personally, it's become so apparent in my own day-to-day life the impact of climate change more and more. It's like this summer I saw the
storm
sun
hitting right now, and it's like, who knows? You know what I mean? Like, could flood Union Station.
Like this summer, there was like 3 or 4 times where I was like, my lungs are actually affected because there was so much smoke, not only from northern Ontario, but also from like literally the other side of the country blowing over here. The sun was like blood red. You could look at it with your eyes because it was so smoky. It's just like those things didn't happen, and I think more and more people are waking up.
Yeah, they are.
But it's just unfortunate because it's actually like 20 years ago this was predicted.
Yeah.
I mean, more than 20 years, but even 20 years ago they were going, 2020 things are going to be a little worse, and then 2035 things are going to be worse, and by 2050 there's going to be 100 million climate refugees, and it's like, when will people actually be like, oh shit, those predictions are probably going to be pretty accurate?
The emotional aspect of people understanding climate change is so important, which is why I really feel like things are shifting because of that personal relationship to it. Like, I'm a North American, so I like get my media from North America, but it feels like every part of North America is affected, like currently. Mm-hmm. We have these crazy fires in Northern Ontario that people probably don't even know about in America because they're too busy figuring out
like the California
what the hurricane
fires
just did to them, what the fires are doing, like to the
drought
smoke. It's just like, droughts, floods, like everyone has their own relationship to an acute, very physical thing. That sadly is how humans work. Mm-hmm. That I'm like, I actually have a lot of hope right now because I feel like people can't deny
are sort
it.
of waking up. Yeah, it's like the Western world is starting to feel these implications.
Which
there are other parts of the world that have been feeling it.
Yeah, they're like, you guys are making all of the emissions of CO2. So can y'all freaking get the hint? But I really, we would go to LA, I was like, I could not believe the smoke and the haze throughout California when we traveled.
Like every day.
And I was just like, this is so sad. I'm so happy to live.
When we first got there, I honestly was like, my lungs feel different.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm breathing in smoke every day.
It's wild. And you wake up in the morning and you're like, why is it feel like it's 4 p.m.? Oh, my God, the door shut.
That scared me so much.
Oh my God. It's like Mother Nature's listening. It's like, you're on to me. I'm going to shatter you.
Spooky. Oh my God, that's scary.
I saw it closing, but I was like, yeah, this is scary. Yeah, like you wake up in the morning in LA and you're like, is it a cloudy day? And it's like, no, by 1 p.m. the sun shines through. Like that was just like smoke in the way. But I really was always so happy to live in Toronto where we don't have that. And then this summer we had that. It looked like LA here.
There's literally a hurricane outside right now. Not literally, but I am like, what is happening?
It's a storm.
It's a storm. Okay, storms are normal.
Storms are normal. It's not a hurricane. Don't worry. And if it was, oh my God. Anyways, Toronto looks like LA now because there's forest fires everywhere, and I just didn't think that was like going to be a thing that happened in my life.
On a hopeful note, it does feel like more and more people are excited to be engaged in this as they can, as things become more efficient. I know we're like not fans of like Elon Musk, but at least like more and more people are excited about electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles, and I'm like, there are maybe they're not fast enough. Hopefully, they're going to be faster, but changes to society that at least are becoming more widespread where we live.
Yes, and don't vote for the conservative government ever in Canada because they made it harder for us to get solar panels. But the solar panels that we have, I feel like with the financial situation we were in, we got to be on the precipice of it. And even doing it, like working with the people, I was like, they're learning more. Like it's just going to become more normal. Everyone on our street was like so excited. They want to talk about how to do it. Like there is a motivation there. Right now, there's a financial cost to putting them on your house. Not a huge one, but there is one. I think in the future, with properly elected officials, there will become an incentive to put solar panels on your house. And that's a future that I'm excited about. And I'm also just like happy to be on the precipice of it and help people even like understand that it is possible, even though I thought we had a battery on our home when we don't.
We're still learning ourselves. There's lots of cool stuff to happen, and it should, as we always say, it's not the responsibility of individuals. I do think it's cool that individuals can get excited and get involved, but ultimately we have to be like, there are bigger polluters than any of us combined. You know, I think I saw some, I'm not going to say a stat
carbon
today, but it was like
tax.
Was it? There's like X amount of, never mind. They compared it to like the UK, Germany, and whatever combined in terms of as much energy as they use. And there was like 20 plants that are doing more than that in terms of their fossil fuels. Yeah, I gotta look at my stats. I just saw it casually today and was like, that just made me think of that. Yeah. It's like, we gotta stick it to the man.
And we just have to stop burning fossil fuels. It's really simple. It honestly is. Okay, wow. Thank you all so much.
Was it an angry podcast?
Like, I think so. It always is when we're talking about like climate change. Like at a certain point, like I know I should have hope, but I'm angry. Yeah. I am angry.
Yeah, like angry. More drastic change needs to happen. Yeah. And I think that is on the level of like government
and corporations.
Take that step.
Oh my God. Okay. Anyways, obviously this is Sidenote podcast. You're going to hear more and more about this. We always end up talking about this, even when we're talking about like farts. we end up being like, farts is energy, and energy is like, did you know that we need to tax the rich in order to pay for a Green New Deal? But thank you so much for listening. Look into solar panels in whichever area you live. There might be some epic, funding, especially if you live in somewhere like Scandinavia, I assume.
But then they have like half the year where there's no light.
Yeah. And don't vote for the conservatives. Don't vote for Republicans. That's Greg saying that. So come for me if you want to.
Well, I'm saying that too.
Okay. Just making sure.
Vote conservative.
Oh my God. Don't edit that.
No, I'm not saying that. There was literally there was like a viral thing, and I think it was in Toronto because someone had a conservative sign and 2 Nazi flags outside of their house.
Oh my God.
And a Confederate flag. I was like, you're in the wrong country.
Yeah, seriously. And in the wrong existence and reality, hon.
Goodbye.
Take a big nap.
Oh, thanks for listening.
Peace.